Leaders. Real life leaders.
If we're not moving the needle forward, why are we here? I can watch TV at home and not have to deal with all this. That's not why we exist, though. You know, we're here to hold people and help them move it forward.
Hey guys, welcome to this week's Leadership Podcast, where we share real life stories from real life leaders to help you become a better leader in your organization. And we are so excited today because I have our amazing co-host, Thomas Lane, with us.
Yes. Hello.
And our amazing co-host, Heather Rimmick.
Hello.
All right, we're going to make everybody blush today because I'm going to tell you today's title. It's how to have a set of balls and then to take those balls and move the ball forward.
That's why we're not on video today.
Yes.
Yeah, because
Yes.
I'm blushing. There you go.
So let's first talk about having a set of balls.
Yeah.
So, you know, we joke about it, but honestly, I truly believe if you want to be a great leader, you have to have a set of balls where you just go, look, I'm not going to make everybody happy all the time.
Yeah.
I got to make this decision, and here's what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. I was listening to a podcast. It was on the Entree Leadership. Dr. Henry Cloud was talking, and I love what he said. And he essentially said a leader who's afraid of doing hard things or hurting people is like a surgeon who's afraid of blood. Like you just can't do it. It's just part of the job. You have to have guts, and you have to be able to put your foot down, and you have to lead. And you literally are not going to get your job done unless you can do that and do it well, and not to be afraid of it either.
And I think that what's important is people often associate the phrase of having a set of balls as a hard leader, but it doesn't mean you're not a compassionate leader.
No.
It's standing firm on a value or a principle or a rule or something that you have set in place and saying, this is why we do this, and this is why we're going to hold firm on this. Not necessarily, it doesn't mean that you're a jerk, your boss is a jerk, or you're a jerk leader. It just means that you are willing to take the stand and hold firm.
I think that one of the things that people have said to me is that I think everyone does, but I think you have different waves. So it's like one time somebody had brought this marshmallow fluff. Do you know what that is?
I do.
They literally put it on my desk and they were like, Chantel, you have been so squishy. Like, you're just like squishy, squishy, squishy. And they're like, we want the Chantel that's like, no, this is what we're doing. Let's go.
Yeah.
Like what is going on with this Miss Fluff going on? And I think that, you have to be balanced, because if you're just hardcore all the time, then
no one's going to be standing behind you. You'll be like, wow, where did all my line go? They went to the other leader. Yeah.
No, but there's times where they need to see Mrs. Fluff is gone, and we've got to make a hard decision. Can you talk about a time where you really feel like I had to have a set of balls in this situation? And you know what else I was thinking is that you need someone to kind of back you. Heather and I are a great balance for each other, because sometimes I will be ball buster and then she'll be Mrs. Fluff. Yeah. And then we
team.
Then we kind of balance each other, because we can't be both ball busters.
No, we got to go home on those days.
Yeah. That's really hard. I had a good friend the other day ask me to come participate in like this round table, this conference, and I said no. I just can't do it. And he asked me probably 3 or 4 times. And he's a good dude. He's a great dude. I just said, it's not essential. It's not what we're about right now. We just can't do it. For me, saying no to things, I think really helps you clearly define what you're for. I think if you can say, okay, we're not for this, I think it helps you more clearly define what you are for. And I think if you make a ton of compromises, your vision gets blurry, your focus gets blurry. And so I think really being able to say, these are our principles, this is what we stand behind, I really think that's just crucial. I think it's so, so important.
Well, I heard a great quote. I came up with it from a friend of mine, and he said this. He said, if it's not a heck yes, then it's a heck no.
Yes.
Don't you like that?
I love that. The book Essentialism by Greg McKeown. I don't know if he said that, but he definitely talks about that in there. And it's a great rule for making decisions. If you're not all in, it's a no. And I think that's amazing.
So we've talked about before, like one would be weddings, right? Like let's say someone came to you and they were like, been with the church from day one. They are there all the time. And they're like, can you do a wedding for me in Ohio.
Yeah, I got one a few weeks ago in Roanoke. I was requested, and I just said, no, I can't do it. And they were, I felt, I mean, they were shocked. They looked at me like, oh, like you're my pastor. We've been here. And I mean, they were just sad. And they're like, we can't imagine our day without you. And I said, guys, with all due, like, I can't, on a Saturday night, I can't go out to Roanoke. Like, it doesn't work. And that's hard. That's really hard. But putting your foot down gently, because I mean, if I'm going to compromise that, Sunday's going to suffer. And you have to look and say, okay, what are we really about? Where are we going to make the most impact? Where are we going to do the most, where are we going to make the most progress? And really to be able to hammer that out, I think you have to be willing to fight for those things.
And let's talk about how to not just have a set of balls, but to take those balls and move it forward.
Yeah. And I think the biggest part of that is in accountability. And that's where people have a hard time standing firm. Yeah. Because you're holding someone to a deadline, right? And they say, oh, well, and we're like, how's it going? Well, so-and-so got pulled off to do this, and then we had to do this, and then they were sick on Wednesday, so they weren't here. And then, so if you're not willing to stand firm and say, we have a saying, like, are you playing above the line or are you playing below the line? Like, are you blaming and justifying, like, why you didn't get it done? Yeah. Or are you going to take responsibility and say, you know what, I understand I was sick. My kid was sick. I had a couple other projects that came up, but I persevered through and met my tasks that you were expecting me to be done. So when you're holding people accountable, which you have to do, you cannot be a successful leader and not hold people accountable. If you can't stand firm, then forget accountability. There is none. Because if you're not going to sit there and say, I don't care what has to happen, I need this on Friday at 2, that's holding people accountable and not listening to their excuses and saying, oh, you're right, it was a bad week, let's move the due date to next week. No, I'm going to hold you accountable to Friday at 2. You said Friday at 2, and we're doing it Friday at 2. And I have to do that with the people that I lead in my departments, and I have to empower them to hold their people accountable. And when they come to me with an excuse and I'm like, stop, I don't care. Get whatever you need, get whatever resources you need. Show me this today at 3:00. And that's it. And you have to hold firm in a compassionate way, but you have to stand firm, because otherwise you can't hold people accountable. If you can't hold people accountable, the ball will not move forward. John Maxwell says, and Chantel always laughs, he has this thing where he says, being a leader, it's uphill all the way. And I have this little hand movement that I make. You can't see me right now. Perfect. But today this week I was talking to Chantel and I said, my new frame is move the ball down the court. And I move my hands from left to right. And it's just really important, because if we're not moving the needle forward, why are we here? I can watch TV at home and not have to deal with all this. Like, that's not why we exist, though. We're here to hold people and help them move it forward.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk about that for just a second, because one of the things that I realized, and I'll give you an example, and then we'll give an example from you. So we have managing brokers, and they are phenomenal. They're just so wise, and they're all about compliance, right? Like making sure the contracts are right, making sure the contracts are in, if someone has a question. And so we realized we were paying hundreds of thousands of dollars for this person to do compliance. And it was like this light bulb that came on for me. And I said, you can't just have people who are doing content and compliance. You have to have content and compliance. Every organization has to have it. On the other side is sales and marketing, because you could be the best pastor in the world and you're creating content. You could have the greatest children's ministry where they're having, but if nobody's coming in, right? So every position has to either have a portion where they have to have the sales and marketing built into their position, or only a percentage of your salaries can go to content creation and compliance. The rest of it's got to go to sales and marketing if you want to grow. If you just want to be a little old organization that's 10 people, then put all your people in compliance and content, right? Yeah. So let's talk about that for, let's say, a church. So for you, let's talk about the roles. And do you have too many people in the content and compliance region? And do you need to have more people in the sales and marketing, or can you split positions? So like, for example, one of the things, we're sitting down with our brokers and we're saying, look, we have to have you, right? Like we can't work without you, but we need to brainstorm how are you going to move the needle forward in your position? Yes, you've got to look at contracts. Yes, you've got to answer broker questions, but it can't just be that. Unless you want your salary to go down, we need to have your position moving the needle forward. So, for example, are you meeting with anyone to recruit them? Are you
meeting it with one-on-one with agents to figure out how can you get an extra ratified contract this week, or this month? How can you bring more production and more value to the company? So those are different suggestions that we're asking them because we want their buy-in with it, but we also want them to understand that, we can't just pay for, like she said, contract and compliance. Yeah.
And we sat down with them and we gave them a task. We said, we need you by the end of the week to come up with 3 ways that you can move the needle forward.
Nice.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. What positions do you have that you could maybe either add a position that's more into sales and marketing, or take a position that you have and go, let's add a feature to where they have something on their report card, on their KPIs, on their things that they're responsible for, is bringing people in.
Sure. Honestly, I think everyone across the board, I think we could always improve and grow in that area personally. That's probably something I don't lead with super well, but I think that honestly having those conversations and encouraging that to not just look at what's in front of you, but constantly be looking, who can we bring in? How can we spread the word? I just had a conversation today about a staff who's just a little overwhelmed, and having the conversation about who have you brought alongside you to do this? Well, no one. Who have you shared this with? Well, no one. Who could we raise up to do this? And I think those are things we as leaders, we really have to set the tone on. Absolutely. When you put it on them, did they return with anything valuable?
We gave this task to them maybe 2 weeks ago, and we said, here's what we want you to do. Sure. And they came back and pushed back, and they were like, well, that's not really our thing. That's not what we like to do. Yeah. And so we kind of again got squishy. Sure. Then all of a sudden we got a set of balls, and we're like, no, we're not doing this. Yeah. You have to have something that's moving forward. You have till Friday to come up with something that's going to move the needle forward.
Sure. Yeah. One thing that you could do is have something that each person on your staff, because you want to do leading indicators, right? Yeah. So in order for your church to grow, you want people to come, right? Absolutely. Bring friends. So a leading indicator would be okay, I want each person on staff to invite 5 new people to church each week. While you may not see, it may take a couple weeks, but then you'll start to see new people coming because you want something that's not the lagging, we want, we had 300 people last month. You're measuring something that already passed. You want to put something in the forefront. So maybe having them do something like that, just as a suggestion.
And rewarding them. Yeah. And leading by example. If we're asking the people in the church to invite them, then us as a leadership staff need to be...
We have to have stories, and we have to be celebrating it and leading the way.
Yeah.
That's huge. And posting on Facebook. That's another thing that we need to be telling our brokers. When was the last time you posted something about our company to bring people into the company that shows, hey, taking a picture of a contract class and promoting it on Facebook.
It's the same thing that the same thing she was talking about. You could be the best preacher in the world, but if no one's there to listen, who knows? They're giving phenomenal content every week in a class. Why not posting and saying, did you know what's required for a bulkhead on Chesapeake Bay Preservation Act? Come to my class today at 10 to find out, and posting that. And, you may have an agent or two from another brokerage that comes in. You start to build relationships. But if they don't know what you're teaching or what you're doing, they don't know how awesome our brokers are. So stuff like that, they need to, there's an idea for them. Listen to the podcast, brokers.
There you go. We got your back.
Anything else that you would say that you can do to get your leaders to help move the ball forward?
One of the things that I've done in the last week or two is, so everyone in our company does 3 commitments each week. Okay. And so people love to put on there, I'm going to create I'm going to write out the process of signing someone up's email. And I'm like, well, that's awesome. But that is not a commitment that I'm willing to accept for you this week, because what I've started to convey to them is I only want them doing commitments that move the needle forward. You can do whatever else you want in the week, but there's going to be 3 things you're going to complete this week that move that needle forward. That's how I'm helping them understand the vision of the company and how we can, and how each person can move forward, from our Salesforce developer to the accounting person. Like, what are the 3 things you're going to do this week to push us one notch forward? And I want them to get in that level of thinking. So you can create an instructional manual on how to create an email address all day long, but that's not going to be one of the 3 things you complete for us this week to move the needle forward. And so that's where I've challenged them, and I've really looked at their commitments, and I had them change. I'd be like, only one of these is good. Bring me back 2 others. And I really went through them this week to make sure that they were needle moving commitments. And that's what I'm going to hold them accountable to.
And I think the other thing is a scoreboard. My son is now in baseball, and last year he was on the league where there's no scoreboard.
No.
They don't
I
even
hate
take
that.
score.
Yeah.
It's
It drives me
so
crazy.
annoying.
Because everyone gets a trophy.
Yes.
Because that's how life is.
Yes, and he finally now is in the league. He's 8, and he's in the league
That's
where
fun.
they actually have a big scoreboard. They have someone back there
There you
putting it
go.
up there. And now I'm into the game.
Yeah.
Now I'm like, okay, wait, what's the score?
You're like, we're down by 2. Come
Yes,
on now.
let's go.
Yeah.
Come
Have you
on.
noticed a change in him and his competitiveness with that?
Oh, he is so competitive.
Oh, he did. He was
he
born
was
competitive.
Yeah, he is.
before without even the scoreboard. He
Sure.
knew the score. He was
He was
telling
counting
everyone
it
the
anyway.
score. He was like, okay. We do a competitive thing for who gets up the stairs first, like our whole family.
She had a competitive thing of who's going to birth the child first. Like Chantel's
There you go.
he
Everything.
was born into this world competitive.
There you go.
Yes. But I think one of the things that's really important is having a scoreboard for each department. And I think we started doing that. And I think you have to put that in the top of your mind every time. So, like, for example, for you, it would be a scoreboard. It's a 90-day goal is really, really good. So you would say you could have weekly, then you can have monthly, then you can have 90-day. I've found personally, anytime we've made a goal past 90 days, everyone's like yearly goal. Well, just make the 90 goal
A quarter of what you want
a quarter
for the
of
year.
whatever you
Yeah.
wanted for the year, because people cannot wrap their head around a whole year. It's too much. But if you put a scoreboard that here's what we're going to achieve in 90 days, then here's what we're achieving in 30 days, and here's our weekly, that to me is how the ball gets moved forward.
And contests between departments or contests between different team members at your church. When you put them head to head in competitions, like this is a great time. Football season's like in full effect, right? So you make something like a fantasy football league where you have like, in our company, it would be like, we have the web department team, we have the video department team, we have the accounting team, we have this. And then they literally go head to head each week and they work towards a Super Bowl. And they could win something so they can kind of see each week where they're falling in the bracket. You got to just make it really interactive, because then it creates peer pressure. Like Chantel has the fantastic story of her friend who like went to 100 Pilates classes or something to get a t-shirt for her team, because if she didn't go, she was going to let her team down for a t-shirt. Peer pressure gets people to do stuff, even if it's for like a piece of candy. They don't want to let team members down. And that's I love team competitions. It's much better. Like if you're like, oh, I just didn't hit it, but when someone's relying on you to reach a goal, you're much more likely to see everyone elevate to that success.
Completely agree.
Well, one thing that I'll give you an example in our video department. We had, when we were editing some of our podcasts we were doing, we realized it was taking them 12 hours to edit the podcast, because they're such great videographers, and they are just perfectionists. So they want the sound to be perfect. They were editing it. They were doing best clips. They were cutting this, putting it on YouTube, putting it on this, putting it on that. And I said, we've got to get this down to 2 hours. We cannot spend that much time on how much to do it. So I said, you brainstorm, how do we get it down? And then I said, get some $5 gift cards and put the 2 videographers together and say, okay, we're going to see who can do this faster. And first one who gets it done is going to get a $5 gift card. Using $5 gift cards for this and that, it doesn't have to be huge amounts, but using those $5 gift cards and getting people riled up and motivated is another good way. But to figure out, asking people if there's a bottleneck, what it is. So let's talk about that for just a second with moving the ball forward, because in the podcast you were talking about my favorite analogy that the Ritz, you guys know Ritz-Carlton's my favorite place.
Oh, I know where you're
earth.
going with this. Yeah,
Yes.
this is amazing.
And so what happened was at the Ritz-Carlton, there was this one resort, and they kept saying that the in-room dining experience was terrible. So they were having bad review. So they went to the kitchen and said, you got to make the food faster. You got to make the food faster. Got to make the food faster. And they were going in, they're like, we can't physically make it any faster. And so the CEO went and said, let me figure out what's going on. They found out that the problem was that the guy who was doing laundry was holding the elevator, so that's why no one could get up to the
linens
rooms.
guy was holding and so the food couldn't get up in time because he was holding it. Yeah,
because he was trying to meet his deadline, and he's like, "This is the only way I can meet my deadline." Yeah.
So do you know that that's when, after listening to that podcast, that's when I went to our video department and said, "What is the linen box that's
what is
holding
the bottleneck?
What's the bottleneck? What's the linen box that's holding that elevator open that's causing you to do 12 hours on the podcast?" And we whittled it down to 2 hours, from that.
I love that analogy because the linens can wait. They can, you know what I'm saying? If I ordered a steak, it needs to be hot. Linens can wait 20 minutes. It doesn't matter. And you're completely prioritizing the wrong things. I love that analogy. And there's so much to it, but I love that the CEO, I love what he thought was the issue wasn't actually the issue. And I love that he was humble enough to go and say, okay, I'm gonna see what's actually going on here. And he literally traced the dish. He watched him, and then he got up to the elevator and he noticed, wait, why is this stopping every floor for 10 minutes? And then he was able to actually accurately address the situation. It's brilliant.
What annoyed me about that story was that he had said that this was a problem that was ongoing for a really long time. And that only once the CEO came, that he was the one who figured out what it was. So for me, I started thinking, I was like, if I was the manager who was the restaurant manager, I would have done that, right? And so that kind of burned me up a little. And I was thinking, how do we get our leaders to really start thinking that way? How do we get rid of those bottlenecks?
So we don't have to follow them around.
I think there's
this. If the CEO has to do it every time,
and the
that's
CEO
a
should
problem.
not. I think there's this illusion where, I changed something, it's going to be fixed. Because maybe in the manager's mind, he changed something. He's like, I came to the kitchen and I said, you guys, you're taking 20 minutes, you got to take 10. So I think sometimes there's this illusion to progress where it's like, okay, we changed this, we added this here, we tweaked this system, it's going to be fixed. But if you don't constantly follow up with it, you're going to miss it. You're going to miss it. And you have to, what he did was he looked at the system from the start to the finish. And I'm with you, the manager should have totally done that. But I think it's what it takes is to get in the nitty gritty and actually talk to the people and actually get in there and see what's going on. But that frustrated me too.
I think that too, sometimes I find myself is that I solve problems for people. And so they then rely on me to solve their problem.
Ah, yes.
And I think that's a huge bottleneck. And so I always go back to this podcast, but I remember vividly this podcast we listened to years ago. It's an EntreLeadership podcast where Dave Ramsey talks about how he taught his people, the people underneath of him, to make decisions as he would.
I love that.
And I have to constantly remind myself, instead of being the one that follows the food to the elevator, I have to coach the people that lead the departments under me to do that. And while I may have to do it with them the first few times, then I have to back up and quit solving the problems for them. When they come to me, I need to start asking questions.
Sure.
Well, have you looked into the why? No, okay, so Go do that first and then
That's
come back to me
step
with a
one.
couple of solutions, because until you stop doing it for them, they won't do it for themselves. And we do that too often just because we want things done quickly.
Yeah.
And instead of taking the time to teach someone, and that's where I create a bottleneck, is because I just solve people's problems for them. So it's easier for them. I mean, if someone's going to keep solving your problem for you, why wouldn't you just come and be like,
Yeah.
hey, we got this. What should I do?
And for you, it's quicker in the short term.
Yes.
But for the long term,
Yes,
it's not.
you-
But it's easy to just be like, I'll
Yes.
just deal with it.
And that's, yes.
And everyone in your role is going to be busy.
Yep.
No one really has the time to do what you're suggesting, but we
Yeah.
have to.
Yeah, you have to. You have to take it. Otherwise, you are making a decision for every single person in the organization.
Henry Cloud was saying that, leaders aren't know-it-alls. They multiply intelligence. That a sign of a good leader is someone who makes the whole room smarter and really not dumber. And I think by doing things for them, we're actually crippling our
Yes.
people. We think we're helping, but we're actually crippling them long term.
Yeah, it's like the parent that, like, their kid falls down, you constantly just pick them right back up. And sometimes you got to let them sit there for a minute, And it's hard as a parent. That's not your natural instinct. Your natural instinct is to grab them and pick them right back up. Sometimes you have to be like, you're okay, figure it out. Because it's not our natural instinct to not help someone. Well, some people don't like to help people, but for us,
One last thing that we do, once a month, we get together as a management team. We get together every week on Zoom because we're all in so many different locations. But once a month, we decide to get together all together. And during that time, we always say, you need to go sometimes we pick one department. So we'll say inside sales. They're having a problem right now. Everyone sit for 1 hour in inside sales and figure out where the bottlenecks is. That's one option. This week, we said, you're going to get partnered up with somebody. And so, Susie will get paired with Brian and they will get partnered up and they have to figure out what is a bottleneck in the department. And they will coach each other on how to fix it. So the conversation would be something like this. So you tell me, what is a bottleneck right now that you would say is in your organization?
Great. We talked about this yesterday. YouTube. So we have a podcast on YouTube. We have a pretty big online community. The last 2 weeks, it's been essentially ready Tuesday morning. I want it Sunday afternoon, and it's been Tuesday morning. So the question is, what is preventing this video, of which there's not much we have to edit and work on? Why is this taking 2 days to get ready? If someone missed church, if they're sick or at home or their kids or something, if they're missing it, why does it take them 2 days to access this content? We literally just had this conversation.
Okay. And what were some of the reasons they gave you?
Some of it was the physical constraints. We have one editing computer, and we're doing social media stuff. We're doing stories. We're doing this and that. So we physically need a computer designated just to upload because it's 4K and it takes a while. Another one, just the size of the team, that we don't have too many people who can edit. So that person felt social media was more important than this, so it got pushed to Tuesday. So personnel, technology, resources, all that. Those are my answers on the bottleneck.
So now, do you think that coming Sunday, do you think that you'll have it Sunday afternoon?
I felt a little fluffy.
Oh, he wasn't having a set of
a little
balls.
fluffy. I did not. I asked for Sunday, and I was met with Monday afternoon is the best we can do now. And I said, okay, we have a little turnover right now. I said, okay, we'll do that. But no, after the analogy of the fluff on the desk, I didn't like that. It challenged me. So I feel like that's me a little bit. So I wish we would have had this.
So are you going to go back? Are you going to go back?
Yeah,
It's not too late.
Yeah, I think
I
think I need to go back right now because now I feel like the fluff.
Yeah.
I feel like you mentally put the fluff on my desk, and I'm like, what the heck is Monday?
No.
We can do this Sunday.
We are going to figure out a way.
Yes.
You tell me what you need.
That's it.
I've made the decision. We are going to do this on Sunday afternoon.
Yeah.
I will be the one to help get anything you
What do
need,
we need?
whether that's a new computer. Let's buy it today.
We bought an iMac yesterday.
Yes.
There you
go.
go.
So if any reason, there's no reason anymore.
We're going to be holding you accountable.
Well, you'll
Both
see
Heather
it.
And I.
You'll see it.
Sunday,
You'll see
I
what
want
it-
a text.
you'll see
Yeah.
when
I
it
want a
comes.
text. And that's the other part we were talking about. You need someone to hold you accountable.
Yes. Oh,
you need accountability.
we're not playing around. Sunday afternoon by 4:00, I want this out. And that's it. Get a set of balls. That's today's episode. We're so glad you joined us today. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Real Life Leadership. If you'd like to get the show notes or access more resources, Log on to reallifeleaders.com/podcast to get the show notes from this episode and any other resources we might have mentioned. And also, we'd love to hear from you. Be sure to review or rate this podcast on Apple Podcasts to help spread the word. And if you have any leadership questions you want answered, email podcast@reallifeleaders.com.